Hello there everybody, it is me XfreezerBunny and welcome back to another Sims 4 speed build. So today we are finally building a traditional Korean house, also known as a Hanok. This is a highly requested build. I've been wanting to do this for years now, but I didn't feel like we had the right items for me to be able to do this house justice. Luckily, we got all of the new stuff from Snowy Escape, so with that pack, I wanted to see what I came up with, and I am really happy with the end result, and hopefully you guys also enjoy this as well because I had a blast doing this. Also, I feel like this is a pretty good follow-up to my last build, which was a snowy winter themed build. This one isn't necessarily a winter themed build, but I feel like this house looks gorgeous in the snow, so I think I'm gonna showcase this in the winter time actually. So yeah, also quick disclaimer, this is actually the second time I'm doing this voiceover because if you didn't know, we didn't have internet for the past 3 days. I've already recorded this voiceover. This build was supposed to go up last week, but yeah, unfortunately that didn't quite work out. I had to change up my schedule because we didn't have internet. It just suddenly disappeared, and it took my service provider like 3 days to send someone over to fix it. Luckily, everything seems to be fine now, so I'm really happy about that. Also, I am going to be taking advantage of this video to talk about my love for K-dramas because I did grow up in the Philippines, and in case you didn't know, Korean dramas and K-pop is pretty mainstream in my country, so yeah, really excited to also talk about this build. But as for the build itself, I tried my best to go for a more traditional style, which is typically what I want to go for every time I do these traditional house builds. I do like to go traditional every time I do the very first one. But you know, I'm also open to doing a more modern version in the future, but usually for the very first one, to introduce you to the style and to the culture, I do like to go for a more traditional route. So yeah, this is a traditional Korean home. It was made for an elder sim and her young adult granddaughter. So the house itself has 2 bedrooms and pretty much every room you would need for it to be functional. It does have a very interesting layout though, which is something that I do try to capture in my traditional builds because I really like focusing on different lifestyles, you know, different cultures and different lifestyles. And I'm really happy with how it all turned out. As you can see right now, we are spending so much time perfecting this roof because I feel like this is one of the most recognizable features of traditional Korean architecture. It's the beautiful, intricate roof, and I tried my best to replicate that in this build using these roof tile detail pieces from Snowy Escape, and it took a while. I think the roof took me maybe 2 hours or maybe 1.5, but yeah, it doesn't look like it, but this actually took me so much time. But I'm really happy with how it all came together because I think it does look like, you know, the real house itself. You know, I do think it turned out pretty accurate in my opinion. Yeah, if you have any suggestions on how I can make it more accurate, please let me know. I'm really open to suggestions. I do want to say that I did take up history of Asian architecture in college. I know I'm just casually dropping that, but I'm sure a lot of you already know that I did have a degree in architecture, and part of that was me taking up a course in history of Asian architecture. It was more of a general you know, course on different architectural styles all throughout Asia, so I couldn't say that I'm necessarily an expert at this type of architecture, but I do have a little bit of an idea. I do know the values and details and, you know, what is important in the different architectural styles. So I just wanted to get that out there for those of you who are wondering. I am also a self-proclaimed architecture buff, so researching about the culture and the history was also something that I look forward to in this build. It's something that I actually enjoy as part of the whole video producing process. I love doing research and also learning about new styles and the culture as well behind it. So hopefully I got to, showcase that in this build, and I'm also really excited to talk about it in the commentary as well. It's one of the things that I look forward to, and I also look forward to your guys' comments as well, hearing your thoughts and hearing your input. Yeah, is always something that I look forward to as well. But having said that, I just want to really quickly mention I was looking around my analytics a couple of days ago, and I discovered that less than half of you are subscribed. Less than half of you are watching. So maybe you can do me a favor and click that subscribe button if you want to be updated on all of the videos. I don't want to sound pushy, it's your choice in the end. I do understand the feeling of having to manage your subscriptions, especially if you are subscribed to so many channels. I don't blame you if you don't subscribe, but if you do, I would really appreciate it. But anyway, back to the build. So here I am once again incorporating this detail. These are basically like eave supports, because I noticed that for Hanok houses, the eaves flare all the way out there, this beautiful shape, and in order for that shape to be possible, they have to make these elaborate bracket systems. I know they're called dogongs in Chinese. I don't know what they're called in Korean or in Japanese, but yeah, it's the elaborate bracket system. And I also wanted to showcase some supports as well for the roof, because realistically, that roof with all of that tile and elaborate detail could not support itself. So I just wanted to make it a little bit more realistic by using some of those debug wood pieces and making them look like roof supports. And now we are moving on to another very elaborate part of this house, and that is the fence and gateway part of this house. And this one I had a lot of fun with. Yeah, I used some of those, recurring tile pieces from Snowy Escape, and I basically created like a fake roof out of them, because I basically just rotated them 45 degrees and they look like, little mini roofs, which I put on top of these sized up walls from Debug as well. So yeah, all of these are from Debug. You aren't gonna need any CC for this build. I also used a lot of the tool mod in this build as well, and one of the questions that I get quite often is, do I require the tool mod in my game for the build to look the way it does in the video? The answer to that is no, you do not need a tool mod for the build to look the way it does in the video. All you need to do is to download the build with bb.move objects, and it should look the way it does in the video 100%. You don't need the tool mod for it to look the way it does in the video. So hopefully that clears things up. I did put a fence inside of this brick wall piece, because I know that that's something that a lot of you do want me to do whenever I use fence pieces from Debug. I do try my best to put a fence in all of them. I can't promise that all the time, but yeah, this one I did put a fence so that the sim wouldn't just magically walk on the wall like it was nothing. So yeah, that's that. And I only put the terracotta tiles in front because honestly, I don't think I needed to put them all around the house. I think having them in the front was enough to get that effect, and I really enjoyed it. So now that I talked a little bit about the house, I just want to share a little bit about the history of Hanok houses, because the history is pretty fascinating. So the history of the Hanok house dates back to the Joseon period, and basically the current one that we're building right now, as you can see, is an L-shaped house, which is a typical shape from the central and southern region of Korea. Hanok houses come in 3 different shapes. There's a box shape, there's an L shape, and then there's an I shape. So the L and the I shape are typical of the central and southern regions of Korea, and the box shape is typical in the northern regions, and that is mainly because of the different climate. The central and southern region have a more milder climate, whereas the northern region obviously has a colder climate, so their climate needs to have more protection and shelter from the cold. That's why their houses tend to be more box shaped with a little courtyard in the middle. And then the central and southern regions are more milder and warmer, so the houses are more open. That's why we have the L shape and I shape. And from what I can gather watching Korean dramas, Hanok houses are kind of a sign of wealth, because I have seen a lot of references from Korean dramas, you know, different characters living in these kinds of clay tile house. That's usually the term they use for these kind of houses. And you know, when a character lives in a clay tile house, then they're basically a rich character. So yeah, I love watching Korean dramas, you guys. In case you didn't know, Korean dramas are pretty mainstream in the Philippines, and I've been watching Korean dramas since I was like 12 or something. This was in 2006. Basically, there's this thing called the Asian wave, where, you know, a lot of Asian media like Asian dramas and Asian pop music became really, really popular in Southeast Asia, and that includes the Philippines. And I'm particularly obsessed with Korean historical dramas, also known as seguk. I'm that guy who loves the big, epic period dramas. I grew up watching Jewel in the Palace. That's the title in the Philippines. I believe it's Daejangyeom in Korea. Not sure if that even was shown in the West, but that was a very epic, beautiful period drama set in the Joseon dynasty, and it was about a woman. You know, she first starts out as a cook in the royal court of Korea, and then she becomes a nurse, and she goes through all of these amazing adventures in her life. Really, really amazing. I love it. I also love Dong-yi. And one of my favorite Korean dramas was Moon That Embraces the Sun. A lot of these are probably older references, because I did have a period where I stopped watching Korean dramas from maybe 2014 to 2019. The Korean drama that got me back into watching K-dramas was actually Crash Landing on You, which I watched on Netflix because there was some hype about it. I'm not the type of person who does get swayed by the hype, but I read up a little bit on the drama itself, and I felt like the premise was very interesting. In case you didn't know, Crash Landing takes place in South Korea, and also some parts of it also take place in North Korea, and it shows kind of like the differences between how people live in the North and South. It's very, very interesting. It's a romantic comedy with some political, historical undertones to it. Really, really good drama, actually. Really, really loved it. But I do want to say my favorite Korean dramas are Princess Hours and Boys Over Flowers, and as I said earlier, Moon That Embraces the Sun. If I had to choose which ones were my favorite, those were probably the top three. I really, really love Princess Hours, you guys. I think it's the perfect mix of, you know, historical, cultural, and, you know, modern day, you know, romantic comedy. Really, really good drama. I highly suggest it. If you haven't seen a Korean drama, watch Princess Hours, or maybe even Crash Landing, because I feel like that one would be more accessible, because that one is available on Netflix. And also, a lot of these dramas came out in the mid to early 2000s, so yeah, I'm not sure if the current generation of P-pop stans would probably understand this. Probably not, but you know, that's a little piece of history from a boomer, you know, K-pop fan, I guess. So yeah. Anyway, I rambled all about K-pop. I totally forgot to talk about the interior, but basically most of the living room is gonna change, so don't really worry about it too much. But I did use a lot of really nice, rich wood colors. I initially went for a much lighter wood, but for this more traditional look that I wanted to go for, I did change the wood into a much richer color, but I did feel like the interior, specifically around the living room area, was a bit dark, so I will change that later on. I will make some updates about that, so don't you worry about it. But right now we're actually working on the master bedroom, which is one of two bedrooms in the house, and this one is the more traditional looking bedroom. This is what I imagine would be grandma's bedroom, and as you can see, I did try my best to make it look traditional. Traditionally, Korean houses would have this traditional heating method called an ondol. That's why the floors are yellow, because of that heating method. I believe the floors are made out of soybean paper or something like that. Really fascinating stuff. This is actually something that I learned in college, and yeah, it's something that Korean culture is very proud of, is their traditional, you know, heating method. And I know I said traditional like 50 million times, but yeah, whatever. But yeah, this is grandma's bedroom. I tried to keep it as traditional as I can, and that includes this bed right here, which is actually on the floor. I wasn't that satisfied with how the bed looks, so I actually will change that by basically making my own custom bed design that looks more traditional. So here we go. I'm using these sized up ottomans from City Living, and I wanted to make sure that this was functional, so I did have my sim test it out, and it does work. The only problem I really had with this was actually matching the different colors. So yeah, that was quite tricky, but I did find, you know, a futon bed thing from Outdoor Retreat, and it came in a yellow swatch, which somehow matched this yellow swatch that came with those City Living ottomans, so I just went ahead and went with that one. So yeah, it does work. I posted a picture on it on Twitter, and everyone was really excited about it, so that's basically how I did that bed technique. Moving on to the young adult bedroom. This is the more contemporary bed with some traditional undertones. So as you can see, most of the room itself is still heavily like floor based, if that even makes sense. Yeah, a lot of the furniture is very low on the floor. I imagine the bed is basically like a futon that they would fold over during the day, and this right here, what I'm making, is actually supposed to be like a floor study table office desk thing. Obviously it doesn't work because the Sims cannot sit on the floor, but yeah, I put like one of those meditation chairs right there just to make it look like, you know, the Sim can use that little spot to maybe study, do some work, and all of that good stuff. Really happy with how this turned out. Definitely a room that I could see a Korean drama protagonist living in, so I'm really happy with that. And here we are basically just updating the living room area, so it's basically like one open space that opens onto the kitchen. The kitchen, it's unfortunate because there's really no way I could have made it more traditional. If there was one thing I would change in this house, it would definitely be to have a more traditional kitchen, which isn't something that's really possible right now because we don't really have like a wood fire oven and things like that, you know, so there's no way I can make the kitchen look more traditional. So let's just say that they renovated the kitchen. So yeah, I just basically updated the living area because those bookshelves that I initially placed, I felt like they were a bit too overwhelming. I feel like they made the space feel more cramped, so I changed them with this display that showcases, you know, china or porcelain, you know, plates and vases and all of that stuff, and I really like it. I think this looks much better. I will also delete the dining table because honestly I feel like it made this kotatsu redundant. Like, I don't think the Koreans actually have a kotatsu, but that's the only piece of furniture I could see them using, even though it's more of a Japanese traditional thing. Oh, there is one item, if you are willing to use CC, I believe Illogical Simmer has made an edit of the kotatsu to take away like the fabric pieces. So yeah, if you want to replace that, you can do so, but I didn't want to use any CC for this build, so I just went with the kotatsu in the end. But yeah, I replaced the dining table because I just felt like it was redundant, you know. It basically served the same purpose as the kotatsu, and it just basically filled up the space, which I wanted to feel more open. So I just ended up deleting the dining table because you didn't really need it. But moving on to the outside, there's really not much in the way of landscaping, but I did try to incorporate a little bit by having this little I guess pond, yeah, water feature, that's the word I was going for. So yeah, those rocks are from, I believe those are actually tables or chairs from Outdoor Retreat. And yeah, not much landscaping. I really couldn't do much because there really wasn't a lot of space, so I just put in some shrubs, and that's pretty much it. I didn't want to put too much because I didn't want to overwhelm the house with landscaping. And if you notice, a lot of traditional Korean houses do tend to have very minimal landscaping anyway, so I just kept it simple. And I also put a little Korean barbecue area over here outside. It's not really a Korean barbecue, it's more of a, you know, hot pot area, but let's just say it's a Korean barbecue, which, by the way, I love Korean barbecue. There's actually a Korean barbecue like right next to my house, so I'm actually craving for it, and I'm probably gonna go there one of these days to have my fill of Korean barbecue. But yeah, at the back of the house, I put some basically pots where you would store fermented food like kimchi, another really traditional feature of Korean houses. I would love like a future expansion pack to actually have like food preservatives. That would be really cool. And I threw in a little bike right there and a little mailbox. But yeah, I think that's actually going to be it for this build. So I'm really happy with how it turns out. Please let me know in the comments how you felt, and also don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment and all of that good stuff. Other than that, I really love doing this build, and let me know if you want to see more Korean builds in the future. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you so much for watching. You all have an awesome day. Enjoy the rest of the video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.